Hello there, fellow dirt enthusiasts and kitchen scrap warriors. Have you ever stood in your kitchen, banana peel in hand, wondering if there's something magical you could do with all those vegetable trimmings instead of just tossing them in the trash? Well, settle in because you're about to discover one of nature's most delightful secrets: how to transform your everyday scraps into rich, dark, crumbly gold that your plants will absolutely adore. You know, there's something almost mystical about composting, isn't there? It's like you're conducting a slow motion symphony where potato peels dance with coffee grounds, where autumn leaves waltz with grass clippings, and where tiny microorganisms work their magic behind the scenes, breaking everything down into something far more valuable than the sum of its parts. It's recycling at its finest, but it's also so much more than that. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Composting sounds complicated, doesn't it? Maybe you've heard whispers about carbon to nitrogen ratios, or perhaps someone mentioned something about thermophilic bacteria, and your eyes glazed over faster than a donut in a bakery window. But here's the beautiful truth. Composting is actually one of the most forgiving and straightforward processes you can master. Mother Nature has been doing this for millions of years without any help from us, and she's quite good at it. Think about it for a moment. Every autumn, leaves fall to the forest floor. Every day, plants shed material, animals leave waste, and organic matter accumulates. And what happens? It all breaks down naturally, creating that rich, dark, earthy-smelling soil that makes forests so lush and vibrant. We're simply going to harness that same process, just in a more controlled and intentional way. The magic really lies in understanding that composting isn't just about waste reduction, though that's certainly a wonderful benefit. When you compost, you're creating something that's genuinely transformative for your garden. This isn't just dirt we're talking about. This is nature's premium plant food, a slow-release fertilizer that feeds your plants exactly what they need, when they need it. It's soil conditioner that can break up stubborn clay and help sandy soil hold moisture. It's teeming with beneficial microorganisms that create a thriving ecosystem right in your garden beds. And perhaps most remarkably, you can create this garden gold using things you probably throw away every single day. Those coffee grounds from your morning brew, perfect composting material. The grass clippings from your weekend lawn mowing, absolutely fantastic for your pile. Even that cardboard Amazon box sitting by your door right now, that's brown gold waiting to happen. But let's be honest about something. If you've ever looked into composting before, you might have encountered some pretty intimidating advice. People throwing around terms like carbon ratios and optimal moisture content and thermophilic decomposition phases. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting technical if that's your thing, but the truth is you don't need a degree in soil science to make excellent compost. You just need to understand a few basic principles, and nature will handle the rest. The real secret to successful composting is surprisingly simple. You need just 4 basic ingredients, and I guarantee you already have access to all of them. First, you need some green material. That's your nitrogen source. Things like kitchen scraps, fresh grass clippings, or coffee grounds. Second, you need brown material. That's your carbon source. Things like dried leaves, cardboard, or newspaper. Third, you need water. Not too much, not too little, just enough to keep everything as moist as a wrung-out sponge. And finally, you need a little bit of air circulation so the good bacteria can do their work. That's it. 4 ingredients: green, brown, water, and air. Mix them together in roughly equal proportions, and you've got yourself a compost pile that will transform your scraps into soil gold faster than you might think possible. Now, I want to share something with you that might change how you think about this whole process. Composting isn't just about the end result, though that dark, crumbly compost is absolutely wonderful. It's about connecting with natural cycles in a way that's become quite rare in our modern world. There's something deeply satisfying about taking part in this ancient process, about watching kitchen scraps gradually transform into something that will nourish new life. And here's what I find particularly exciting. Once you start composting, you'll begin to see organic waste differently. Instead of looking at that pile of vegetable peelings as garbage, you'll see potential. Instead of bagging up those grass clippings for the city to haul away, you'll see free fertilizer. It's like developing a new superpower, the ability to see treasure where others see trash. The timing couldn't be better either. More and more people are becoming aware of how much organic waste we send to landfills, where it can't decompose properly and actually contributes to methane emissions. But when you compost that same material in your backyard, it becomes part of a healthy cycle that benefits your immediate environment. You're not just reducing waste, you're actively improving the soil around your home. And let's talk about the practical benefits for just a moment. Good compost can dramatically improve your garden's health. Plants grown in compost-amended soil tend to be more resistant to diseases and pests. They often need less water because the compost helps the soil retain moisture. And the slow-release nature of compost nutrients means your plants get fed gradually over time, rather than getting a quick burst followed by nothing. But perhaps the most compelling reason to start composting is simply how accessible it is. You don't need expensive equipment or a huge yard. You don't need to follow complicated schedules or precise measurements. You can start with a simple pile in a corner of your yard or even with a small container system if you're in an apartment. The process adapts to your situation, not the other way around. What I'm going to show you today is the straightforward, no-nonsense approach to composting that actually works in the real world. We're going to talk about what materials work best and why, how to set up your first pile, what to expect as things break down, and how to troubleshoot the few issues you might encounter along the way. By the end of this guide, you'll have everything you need to start turning your scraps into soil gold, and you'll understand why so many gardeners consider their compost pile to be the heart of their garden. So grab that banana peel, save those coffee grounds, and let's dive into the wonderful world of composting. Trust me, once you see how simple and rewarding this process can be, you'll wonder why you waited so long to start. Your plants are going to thank you, your wallet will thank you, and honestly, there's something quite magical about participating in this ancient alchemy that transforms waste into wealth, scraps into soil, and garbage into garden gold. Now that you've got the basics down, let's dive into the real magic of composting. You know, there's something deeply satisfying about watching kitchen scraps transform into black gold, but understanding exactly what's happening in your compost pile can make the difference between success and frustration. Let me paint you a picture. You've just built your first compost pile, layering your greens and browns like we discussed. But here's what most people don't realize. Within just a few days, your pile becomes a bustling metropolis of microscopic life. We're talking about billions of bacteria, fungi, and other decomposers working around the clock to break down your organic matter. The process happens in distinct phases, and each one tells a story. First comes the mesophilic phase, where moderate temperature bacteria get to work on the easy stuff, the sugars and simple carbohydrates in your fruit peels and vegetable scraps. These bacteria are like the cleanup crew that arrives first at the scene, taking care of the obvious debris. But as they work, they generate heat. Lots of it. This is when things get interesting. When your pile reaches around 140 degrees Fahrenheit, the thermophilic bacteria take over. These are the heavy hitters, the ones that can break down complex proteins, cellulose, and even some of the tougher plant materials. This is why you might see your compost pile steaming on a cool morning. It's literally cooking itself from the inside out. The heat serves another crucial purpose beyond just speeding up decomposition. Those high temperatures kill off disease-causing pathogens and weed seeds that might be lurking in your organic matter. It's nature's way of sterilizing your future soil amendment. Pretty clever, right? Now here's where most beginners run into trouble. They think composting is a set-it-and-forget-it process. But those hardworking bacteria need 3 things to thrive. And if any one of them is missing, your compost pile becomes a smelly, slimy mess instead of the sweet-smelling earth you're hoping for. First, they need oxygen. Without it, different bacteria take over, the anaerobic ones that produce hydrogen sulfide and other foul-smelling compounds. This is why turning your pile regularly isn't just a suggestion, it's essential. Every time you turn your compost, you're giving those beneficial bacteria the breath of fresh air they need to keep working efficiently. Second, they need the right moisture level. Too dry, and the bacteria go dormant. Too wet, and you create those anaerobic conditions we want to avoid. The magic number is about 50 to 60% moisture content, which feels like a wrung-out sponge when you grab a handful. Third, they need the right balance of nutrients. This is where that carbon to nitrogen ratio comes in. The bacteria use carbon for energy and nitrogen for building their cellular structures. When these are in balance, typically around 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, your pile hums along beautifully. But here's the thing, you don't need to get out a calculator and start measuring ratios. Nature has given us a simple visual guide. Green materials, your fresh grass clippings, kitchen scraps, and garden trimmings are high in nitrogen. Brown materials, your dried leaves, paper, and cardboard are high in carbon. Mix them roughly equally by volume, and you'll be in the ballpark. The beauty of composting is that it's incredibly forgiving. If your pile is too wet, add more browns. If it's not heating up, add more greens. If it smells bad, turn it more frequently. The bacteria will guide you through their behavior, and you'll quickly learn to read the signs. As your pile progresses through its hot phase, something magical happens. The temperature begins to drop, not because the process is failing, but because the easy-to-decompose materials have been consumed. This is when the fungi begin to take over, working on the more complex organic compounds like lignin and cellulose. This is also when larger decomposers join the party. Beetles, millipedes, and other insects move in to help break down larger pieces. And finally, the earthworms arrive, nature's ultimate soil conditioners. They consume the partially decomposed organic matter and excrete castings that are incredibly rich in nutrients and beneficial microorganisms. The whole process, from fresh scraps to finished compost, typically takes anywhere from 2 to 6 months, depending on your materials, your climate, and how actively you manage the pile. In hot, humid climates with regular turning, you might have finished compost in just 6 to 8 weeks. In cooler climates or with less active management, it might take a full year. But here's what makes this process so remarkable. What you're creating isn't just decomposed organic matter, you're cultivating a complex ecosystem of beneficial microorganisms that will continue working in your soil long after you apply the finished compost. These microbes form symbiotic relationships with plant roots, helping them absorb nutrients more efficiently and protecting them from diseases. The finished compost also improves soil structure in ways that synthetic fertilizers simply can't match. It creates tiny spaces in the soil that hold both air and water, giving plant roots the perfect environment to thrive. In clay soils, it improves drainage. In sandy soils, it increases water retention. It's like giving your garden a complete makeover from the ground up, and the nutrients in compost are released slowly over months or even years as the remaining organic matter continues to decompose. This means your plants get a steady supply of nutrition rather than the quick hit and crash cycle of synthetic fertilizers. Perhaps most importantly, composting connects us to natural cycles in a way that's increasingly rare in our modern world. Every time you add scraps to your pile, every time you turn it and feel the heat it generates, you're participating in the same process that has been recycling nutrients on Earth for millions of years. You're taking what many consider waste and transforming it into something valuable. You're reducing the amount of organic matter going to landfills, where it would decompose anaerobically and produce methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Instead, you're creating a product that actually helps sequester carbon in the soil. The process teaches patience, observation, and respect for natural systems. It shows us that decay isn't the opposite of growth, but rather an essential part of it. Every banana peel, every fallen leaf, every grass clipping contains the potential to nourish new life. So as you embark on your composting journey, remember that you're not just making soil amendment. You're becoming part of an ancient cycle, a participant in the fundamental process that makes all terrestrial life possible. You're turning what others might see as trash into treasure, scraps into soil, waste into wonder. The pile you build today will feed your plants tomorrow, and the nutrients will continue cycling through your garden ecosystem for years to come. That's the real magic of composting. It's not just about the end product, it's about becoming part of the endless dance of growth, decay, and renewal that sustains all life on Earth. Now that you've grasped the fundamental science of composting and learned to create your first pile, let's dive deeper into the practical side of this ancient art. Because here's the thing about composting. It's wonderfully forgiving, but there are definitely techniques that can make the difference between decent compost and absolutely spectacular soil gold. Think of composting as cooking. You can throw ingredients together and get something edible, or you can understand the why behind each step and create something truly extraordinary. The microorganisms don't care if you're a perfectionist, but they do respond beautifully to a few key principles that most gardeners overlook. Let's start with something that trips up nearly every beginner, the moisture game. You've probably heard that compost should feel like a wrung-out sponge, but what does that actually mean? Here's a simple test that works every time. Grab a handful of your compost mix and squeeze it firmly. If water drips out, it's too wet. If it crumbles and won't hold together at all, it's too dry. What you want is for it to hold its shape when squeezed, but break apart easily when you poke it with your finger. Moisture isn't just about the feel, though. It's about creating highways for your microbial workforce. Too dry, and those beneficial bacteria can't move nutrients around effectively. Too wet, and you've essentially created underwater conditions where only anaerobic bacteria can survive. Those anaerobic fellows aren't necessarily bad, but they work much more slowly and tend to create that swampy, rotten egg smell that makes neighbors complain. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think moisture is a set it and forget it thing, but your compost pile is alive and breathing. In summer, it's going to dry out faster. During rainy periods, it might get waterlogged. You need to become friends with your pile, checking on it regularly, adjusting as needed. I like to think of it as taking the pulse of a living system. Now let's talk about something that separates the casual composters from the soil alchemists: understanding your carbon sources. Not all browns are created equal, and this is where you can really dial in your results. Dry leaves are fantastic, but they break down at different rates depending on the type. Oak leaves, for instance, are tougher and more acidic, taking longer to decompose but adding incredible structure to your finished compost. Maple leaves break down quickly and add sweetness that your microbes absolutely love. Cardboard is another game changer that most people use incorrectly. The key is surface area. Don't just throw whole pieces in there. Tear it into strips, roughly the size of your palm. This gives your decomposers way more edges to work with. And here's a pro tip. If you can soak that cardboard in water for a day before adding it to your pile, you'll speed up the process considerably. Coffee grounds deserve special mention because they're so available and so misunderstood. Yes, they're technically green material despite being brown in color, but they're also slightly acidic and can become compacted if you use too much at once. The sweet spot is about 10% of your total green material. Any more than that, and you might slow things down rather than speed them up. Let's address the elephant in the compost yard: turning. Everyone talks about turning compost, but few people explain why or how to do it effectively. When you turn compost, you're not just mixing things up randomly, you're introducing oxygen to feed your aerobic bacteria, you're redistributing moisture, and you're moving material from the outside edges where it's cooler into the hot center where the real action happens. But here's something most guides don't tell you. You don't need to turn your entire pile every time. Sometimes you can just create air pockets by poking holes with a pitchfork or even a long stick. This passive aeration can be just as effective as full turning, especially if you're dealing with a large pile or physical limitations. The timing of turning matters too. If your pile is actively heating up, wait until it starts to cool down before turning. Turning too early can actually slow down the process by disrupting the microbial communities that are just getting established. Think of it like opening the oven door while bread is rising. Sometimes patience serves you better than action. Temperature is fascinating to track if you have the tools, but don't get obsessed with hitting specific numbers. The real magic happens in phases. First, you get the mesophilic bacteria working at moderate temperatures, breaking down the easily digestible materials. Then the thermophilic bacteria take over, creating those impressive heat spikes that can reach 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. This hot phase is what kills pathogens and weed seeds, but it doesn't last forever. As the easily decomposed materials get used up, temperatures drop, and a whole new crew of microorganisms moves in to finish the job. Here's something that will change how you think about compost timing. The pile tells you when it's ready, not the calendar. Finished compost has a distinctive earthy smell. Not sweet, not sour, not musty, but rich and clean like forest floor after rain. It should be dark brown to black, crumbly in texture, and you shouldn't be able to identify most of the original materials. But here's the kicker. You don't always need to wait for completely finished compost. Partially decomposed compost can be incredibly valuable as a soil amendment, especially if you're building new garden beds. Those larger pieces of organic matter will continue breaking down in your soil, feeding plants slowly over time and improving soil structure as they decompose. The seasonal aspect of composting is something many people overlook. Your pile behaves differently in different seasons, and working with these natural rhythms rather than against them can dramatically improve your results. Fall is obviously prime time with all those leaves available, but it's also when you can build your biggest, most ambitious piles because the cooler weather ahead will slow decomposition just enough to let you accumulate materials. Winter composting is entirely possible, even in cold climates. The pile might freeze on the outside, but if it's large enough, the center can stay active. Plus, freezing and thawing actually helps break down tough materials like woody stems. Spring is when everything wakes up again, and you'll often see a surge of activity as temperatures rise. Summer presents its own challenges with heat and potential drought, but it's also when you have the most green materials available. The trick is building smaller, more manageable piles that you can keep properly watered. Let's talk about troubleshooting, because every composter runs into issues. If your pile smells bad, it's usually too wet or has too much nitrogen-rich material. The fix is adding dry brown material and turning to introduce air. If it's not heating up at all, it might be too dry, too small, or lacking nitrogen. Add green materials and water and give it a good mix. Pests can be managed largely through what you put in your pile. Avoid meat, dairy, oils, and cooked foods, and you'll avoid most animal visitors. If you do get unwanted attention, it's usually because something sweet or protein-rich made it into the pile. The solution is often to bury kitchen scraps in the center of the pile rather than leaving them on the surface. The real secret to exceptional compost isn't any single technique, it's developing a relationship with the process. Start paying attention to how your pile responds to different materials, different weather conditions, different treatment. Keep mental notes about what works and what doesn't in your specific situation. Every yard is different. Every climate presents unique challenges and opportunities. What works perfectly for someone in humid Georgia might need adjustment in arid Arizona. The basic principles remain the same, but the application is where art meets science. Remember, you're not just making compost, you're participating in one of nature's most fundamental processes. Every kitchen scrap you divert from the landfill, every leaf you transform into soil food, every handful of finished compost you work into your garden beds is a small act of environmental stewardship. The finished product is just the beginning. When you spread that dark, crumbly compost around your plants, you're not just adding nutrients, you're introducing billions of beneficial microorganisms, improving soil structure, increasing water retention, and creating the foundation for a thriving garden ecosystem. This is why composting becomes addictive for so many gardeners. It's not just about waste reduction or saving money on fertilizer. Though those are nice benefits, it's about connecting with natural cycles, understanding the web of life that exists in every handful of soil, and taking an active role in regenerating the earth rather than just consuming from it. So as you continue your composting journey, remember that every pile is a learning opportunity. Every season brings new possibilities, and every finished batch is proof that you can indeed turn waste into wonder. The microorganisms are ready to do the heavy lifting. You just need to give them the right conditions and trust the process. Now we're diving into the heart of your composting journey, where understanding meets action. You've grasped the fundamentals, learned about the science, and discovered the remarkable benefits. But here's where many beginners stumble, where enthusiasm meets the messy reality of managing a living system. This is about troubleshooting, adapting, and truly mastering the art of turning waste into garden gold. Let's be honest, composting isn't always smooth sailing. Your pile might smell like a swamp, refuse to heat up, or attract every raccoon in the neighborhood. But here's the beautiful truth about composting. It's incredibly forgiving. These challenges aren't failures, they're simply your compost pile communicating with you, telling you what it needs to thrive. The most common issue you'll encounter is that dreaded smell. If your compost smells like rotten eggs or sewage, it's gone anaerobic, meaning those beneficial bacteria have been replaced by their stinky cousins who work without oxygen. This usually happens when your pile becomes too wet or has too much nitrogen-rich green material. The solution is surprisingly simple. Add brown materials like shredded newspaper, dried leaves, or cardboard, then turn the pile thoroughly to introduce oxygen. Think of it as performing CPR on your compost, bringing it back to life. On the flip side, if your pile isn't heating up or seems to be decomposing at the speed of geological time, it's likely too dry or lacks nitrogen. A pile that feels like dust when you grab a handful needs water, but add it gradually while mixing. If it's moist but still sluggish, boost it with nitrogen-rich materials like grass clippings, coffee grounds, or fresh kitchen scraps. Remember, those microorganisms are living creatures and they need the right conditions to throw their decomposition party. Temperature is your pile's vital sign. A healthy, active compost pile should reach temperatures between 130 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit in its core. If you don't have a compost thermometer, you can gauge this by feeling the heat radiating from the center or watching for steam when you turn it on cool mornings. But don't panic if your pile doesn't get blazing hot, especially in smaller systems. Cold composting still works, it just takes longer. And honestly, the worms don't mind the cooler temperatures. Speaking of size, there's a critical mass for hot composting. Your pile needs to be at least 3 feet wide and 3 feet tall to generate and maintain heat effectively. Smaller piles can still compost beautifully, but they'll work more slowly and rely more on worms and other decomposers than the heat-generating bacteria. If you're working with limited space, consider this a feature, not a bug. Cold composting is gentler and requires less maintenance. Seasonal composting presents its own set of challenges and opportunities. Winter doesn't stop decomposition, but it certainly slows it down. In colder climates, your pile might freeze on the outside while continuing to work slowly in the insulated center. This is perfectly normal. You can continue adding materials throughout winter, creating layers that will spring to life when temperatures warm up. Some composters even build insulated bins or surround their piles with straw bales to maintain activity during the coldest months. Summer brings different challenges. Excessive heat can actually slow decomposition if your pile gets too dry. During hot spells, you might need to water more frequently and provide some shade. Conversely, summer storms can waterlog your pile, leading to those anaerobic conditions we discussed. A simple tarp can protect your pile from excessive rainfall while still allowing air circulation. The critter question inevitably arises. Yes, animals might be attracted to your compost, but this is usually a management issue, not an inherent problem. Avoid adding meat, dairy, oils, or cooked foods that smell appealing to raccoons, opossums, or dogs. If you're dealing with persistent visitors, consider an enclosed bin system or bury fresh kitchen scraps in the center of your pile under a layer of browns. Most animals lose interest when they can't easily access the good stuff. Flies and other insects are part of the composting ecosystem, but excessive numbers usually indicate too much exposed food waste. The solution is simple: always cover fresh additions with brown materials. This creates a barrier that reduces odors and gives those kitchen scraps time to begin decomposing before insects discover them. Your compost's appearance will change dramatically throughout the process, and these changes tell a story. Fresh materials gradually lose their recognizable features, becoming darker and more uniform. You might notice white, thread-like fungal growth, especially in cooler weather. This is beneficial, not harmful. These fungi are breaking down woody materials and creating beneficial networks in your compost. The final product should be dark, crumbly, and smell earthy, like rich forest soil. Timing your compost harvest requires observation and patience. Finished compost won't look like the individual materials you put in. You shouldn't be able to identify banana peels, coffee grounds, or grass clippings. It should have a uniform, soil-like texture and that distinctive earthy smell. This process typically takes 3 to 6 months for hot composting, or 6 months to 2 years for cold composting, depending on your management style and materials. But here's a secret. Many beginners don't realize you don't need to wait for perfect compost to start using it. Partially decomposed compost, sometimes called rough compost, is excellent for mulching around established plants or incorporating into garden beds in fall. The decomposition process continues in the soil, feeding plants gradually while improving soil structure. Different composting methods suit different lifestyles and situations. Traditional pile composting works well if you have space and don't mind the maintenance. Tumbler systems are convenient for smaller spaces and easier turning, though they typically produce smaller batches. Vermicomposting uses worms to process kitchen scraps in compact bins, perfect for apartment dwellers or anyone wanting to compost year-round indoors. The key to successful composting lies in understanding that you're not just managing waste, you're nurturing a living ecosystem. Those billions of microorganisms working in your pile are performing one of nature's most essential functions. The recycling of nutrients that keeps our planet's cycles running smoothly. When you provide them with the right conditions, they reward you with something more valuable than any store-bought fertilizer. Your role as a composter is part chef, part gardener, part scientist. You're mixing ingredients, observing results, and adjusting as needed. Some days you'll add materials, other days you'll turn the pile, and sometimes you'll simply observe and appreciate the transformation happening before your eyes. This process connects you to natural cycles that have been operating for millions of years. Long before humans invented plastic bags and garbage trucks, as you gain experience, you'll develop an intuitive sense for what your compost needs. You'll recognize the smell of healthy decomposition versus problematic anaerobic conditions. You'll know by feel whether your pile needs water or browns. You'll anticipate seasonal changes and adjust your management accordingly. This knowledge comes not from books or videos, but from hands-on experience, from the satisfaction of solving problems and witnessing the magic of transformation. Remember, every expert composter started exactly where you are now, with questions, uncertainties, and probably a few smelly mistakes. The difference between a beginner and an expert isn't perfection, it's persistence. Every challenge you encounter teaches you something valuable about the process, about your specific conditions, and about the remarkable resilience of natural systems. Your compost pile is forgiving, adaptive, and eager to work with you. It doesn't require perfection, just attention and care. When problems arise, and they will, approach them with curiosity rather than frustration. Each issue is an opportunity to deepen your understanding and improve your technique. The pile that smells today will be producing beautiful compost tomorrow with the right adjustments. This journey of turning scraps into soil is ultimately about more than just composting. It's about developing a relationship with natural processes, understanding your role in larger ecological cycles, and discovering the profound satisfaction that comes from creating something valuable from what others might consider waste. Every banana peel, every handful of leaves, every turn of the pile is a step toward becoming not just a gardener, but a steward of the soil that sustains all life. Now that you've built your foundation and gained confidence with the basics, let's dive into the most rewarding yet often overlooked aspect of composting: troubleshooting challenges and fine-tuning your system. Because here's the thing about composting that nobody really tells you up front. It's not a set it and forget it process. It's more like tending a slow burning fire or nurturing a garden. Your pile will communicate with you, sometimes loudly, and learning to read those signals transforms you from a casual composter into someone who truly understands the alchemy happening in your backyard. Let's start with the elephant in the room, or should I say the smell in the yard. Odors are probably the number one concern that stops people from composting or sends them running back to the garbage bin. But here's what's fascinating. A properly managed compost pile shouldn't smell offensive at all. It should smell earthy, rich, like the forest floor after rain. When your pile starts announcing itself to the entire neighborhood, it's trying to tell you something important. That rotten egg smell, that sour, vinegary tang, or that ammonia-like punch to the nose, these are all signs that your pile has gone anaerobic. The beneficial bacteria that break down organic matter need oxygen to do their work efficiently. When they don't get it, the not-so-beneficial bacteria take over, and they produce some pretty unpleasant byproducts. The fix is usually straightforward but requires a bit of detective work. Too much green material, especially grass clippings or fresh kitchen scraps, can create a slimy, oxygen-starved environment. Too much moisture can drown out the air spaces. Or perhaps you haven't turned your pile in weeks, and those air pockets have collapsed. The solution often involves adding more brown material, that carbon-rich stuff like dried leaves, shredded paper, or cardboard. These materials create structure, little pockets where air can flow. Turn your pile thoroughly, really mix it up, and you'll often notice the smell beginning to fade within a day or two. If your pile is waterlogged, you might need to add even more browns and possibly cover it during the next rain. Think of browns as the sponge that soaks up excess moisture while creating breathing room for your beneficial microbes. Now let's talk about uninvited guests. Flies, particularly fruit flies, seem to appear out of nowhere the moment you start composting. They're attracted to fresh fruit and vegetable scraps, especially anything sweet or already decomposing. The key is burial. Don't just toss your kitchen scraps on top of the pile. Dig a little hole, add your scraps, and cover them with brown material or finished compost. This simple step eliminates most fly problems because it removes their landing strip and nursery. Rodents present a different challenge. Mice, rats, and sometimes larger animals are drawn to food scraps, particularly if you're composting things you shouldn't be. Meat, dairy, oils, and cooked foods don't belong in most home compost systems. They decompose slowly, create odors, and attract animals. But even with proper materials, you might find evidence of small visitors. A well-maintained hot compost pile is less attractive to rodents because the heat and active decomposition make it an inhospitable environment. Cold composting systems or piles that have cooled down are more likely to attract animals. If you're dealing with persistent animal problems, consider your composting location and method. An enclosed bin or tumbler might be worth the investment. Some people create a simple wire cage around their pile, buried a few inches into the ground. Others use a layer of wire mesh at the bottom of their pile. The goal isn't to create an impenetrable fortress, but to make your compost pile less appealing than other food sources in the area. Temperature troubles are another common stumbling block. Your pile might never heat up, or it might get blazing hot and then cool down quickly. Temperature is an indicator of microbial activity. A hot pile means your bacteria are working hard, consuming oxygen and organic matter at a rapid pace. But not every pile needs to be a furnace. Cold composting works perfectly well. It just takes longer. The key is understanding what's happening and adjusting your expectations accordingly. If you want heat but aren't getting it, size matters. Small piles don't retain heat well. You need a critical mass of materials, usually at least 3 feet in each direction, to generate and maintain high temperatures. The ratio of greens to browns affects heat production too. Too much brown material and you won't have enough nitrogen to fuel rapid decomposition. Too much green and you'll likely end up with that smelly, anaerobic mess we discussed earlier. Moisture levels directly impact both temperature and decomposition speed. A pile that's too dry won't heat up because the microbes need water to function. A pile that's too wet won't heat up because excess water displaces oxygen. The sweet spot feels like a wrung-out sponge, damp but not dripping. This can be tricky to achieve and maintain, especially with changing weather conditions. Speaking of weather, seasonal challenges keep composting interesting year-round. Summer brings heat and often drought conditions. Your pile might dry out quickly, slowing decomposition to a crawl. Regular watering becomes essential, but be careful not to overdo it. Hot weather also accelerates decomposition, which means more frequent turning and faster consumption of materials. It's the season when your pile can go from perfect to problematic in just a few days. Winter presents the opposite challenge. Cold temperatures slow microbial activity to a near standstill. Your pile might freeze solid, effectively pausing the decomposition process until spring. This isn't necessarily a problem. Think of it as putting your compost on hold. You can continue adding materials throughout winter, creating layers that will begin decomposing when temperatures rise. Some composters build larger piles in fall, knowing that the extra mass will help maintain some microbial activity even in cold weather. Spring brings a burst of activity as microbes wake up and begin processing the materials that accumulated over winter. It's often the best time to turn your pile, add fresh materials, and get things moving again. Fall is prime composting season in many areas. An abundance of fallen leaves provides excellent brown material, and the moderate temperatures are perfect for active decomposition. Rain can be both blessing and curse. Gentle, consistent moisture is ideal for composting. Heavy downpours can waterlog your pile, creating anaerobic conditions. Extended dry periods can desiccate your materials, essentially mummifying them. A simple cover, a tarp, piece of plywood, or even a large garbage bag can help you manage moisture levels. You're not trying to keep your pile completely dry, just preventing it from becoming waterlogged or bone dry. The truth is, every compost pile is unique. The materials you add, your climate, your maintenance routine, even the specific microbes in your local soil all influence how your pile behaves. What works perfectly for your neighbor might not work for you, and that's completely normal. The key is observation and adaptation. Your pile will tell you what it needs if you pay attention. Sometimes the best solution is patience. Composting operates on natural timescales, not human ones. That pile that seems to be doing nothing might be working away slowly, breaking down materials at a pace that suits the conditions you've provided. Not every pile needs to be a speed demon. Some of the best compost comes from systems that take their time, allowing for complete decomposition and the development of complex microbial communities. The art of troubleshooting extends beyond fixing problems to optimizing your system. Maybe your compost is fine, but you want it to be exceptional. Perhaps you want to speed up the process, improve the texture, or increase the nutrient content. This is where composting becomes truly engaging, when you start experimenting with different materials, ratios, and techniques. Consider the diversity of your inputs. A pile made entirely of grass clippings and kitchen scraps will produce different compost than one that includes fallen leaves, coffee grounds, shredded paper, and wood chips. Each material brings its own characteristics, nutrients, texture, decomposition rate, and microbial communities. The more diverse your inputs, the more complex and beneficial your finished compost becomes. This is also where composting connects you to the broader ecosystem. You begin to notice the seasonal rhythms of organic matter in your area. When do the leaves fall? What kitchen scraps do you generate most? How does your garden produce materials throughout the growing season? Composting becomes a way of working with these natural cycles rather than fighting against them. The challenges you encounter aren't obstacles to overcome, but opportunities to deepen your understanding. That smelly pile teaches you about anaerobic conditions. The pile that won't heat up reveals something about carbon-nitrogen ratios or moisture levels. The compost that takes longer than expected shows you the value of patience and observation. Each problem solved makes you a better composter and connects you more deeply to the natural processes at work in your backyard. Remember, composting is ultimately about transformation, turning waste into wealth, problems into solutions, and linear consumption into circular cycles. The challenges are part of that transformation, both for your materials and for you as a composter. Every pile that goes anaerobic, every invasion of fruit flies, every season of slow decomposition teaches you something valuable about working with natural systems rather than against them. Now that you've mastered the art of composting, you're ready to witness the transformation that's been quietly happening in your bins and piles all this time. This is where the magic truly reveals itself, where months of patience and care culminate in something extraordinary. You're about to harvest your first batch of finished compost, and trust me, it's a moment that never gets old. Walking up to a mature compost pile feels different than tending to an active one. The smell changes first from the earthy, slightly funky aroma of decomposition to something rich and clean like the forest floor after rain. The texture transforms from recognizable scraps and materials into something uniform and crumbly. When you dig into finished compost, it should feel like the most premium potting soil you've ever touched. dark and chocolatey with a texture that holds together when squeezed but crumbles apart easily. The first time you see your kitchen scraps and yard waste transformed into this black gold, it's genuinely emotional. Those banana peels, coffee grounds, and autumn leaves that were destined for the landfill have become something that will feed your plants for years to come. You've closed the loop, participated in the ancient cycle of growth, death, and rebirth that sustains all life on Earth. But harvesting compost isn't just about scooping it up and spreading it around. There's an art to knowing when it's truly ready and how to use it most effectively. Finished compost should be unrecognizable from its original ingredients. You might spot the occasional avocado pit or eggshell fragment, but overall you shouldn't be able to identify what went into making it. The temperature should match the ambient air temperature, no longer generating heat from active decomposition. And perhaps most importantly, it should smell good, earthy and rich, never sour or putrid. Sometimes you'll find that your compost is almost ready but not quite there yet. Maybe there are still visible pieces of organic matter, or perhaps it's still slightly warm in the center. Don't worry, this is perfectly normal. You can sift out the finished portions and return the larger pieces to your active pile. Many composters keep a simple hardware cloth screen for this purpose, shaking the compost through to separate the gold from the rough. The timing of your harvest matters too. Spring and fall are typically the best times to apply compost to your garden beds. In spring, you're preparing the soil for the growing season, giving plants a slow-release source of nutrients as they wake up from winter dormancy. Fall applications help protect plant roots through winter while slowly releasing nutrients that will be available when spring arrives. When you're ready to use your compost, resist the urge to dump it all in one place. Think of it as a precious resource that should be distributed thoughtfully. A thin layer, maybe half an inch to an inch thick, spread across your garden beds will work wonders. You can work it gently into the top few inches of soil or simply let it sit on the surface as a mulch where earthworms and other soil organisms will gradually incorporate it. For potted plants, mix your homemade compost with existing potting soil at about a 1:3 ratio. Pure compost can be too rich for many plants, especially seedlings, so diluting it ensures your plants get the benefits without being overwhelmed. For lawn care, you can spread a thin layer of screened compost over your grass in early spring or fall. This top dressing will slowly feed your lawn while improving soil structure. Container gardeners have a special advantage here. Your homemade compost can dramatically reduce the cost of gardening while providing better nutrition than most commercial potting mixes. Just remember to screen it well for container use, removing any large chunks that might impede drainage or root growth. The beauty of harvesting your own compost extends beyond just the practical benefits. There's something deeply satisfying about using soil amendment that you created yourself, knowing exactly what went into it and how it was made. You're not just feeding your plants, you're participating in a process that connects you to every gardener who came before you, to every forest that naturally composts its own leaf litter, to the fundamental cycles that keep our planet alive. As you begin to use your finished compost, you'll notice changes in your garden that go far beyond just healthier plants. The soil will feel different under your hands, more alive and responsive. Plants will develop stronger root systems, better able to withstand drought and disease. The color of your vegetables will be more vibrant, the flavor more intense. Flowers will bloom more abundantly, and even your houseplants will seem to perk up when repotted with your homemade compost blend. But perhaps the most rewarding aspect of composting is how it changes your relationship with waste. Once you start composting, you'll find yourself looking at organic matter differently. That pile of fall leaves becomes a treasure trove of brown material. Coffee shops become sources of free, nitrogen-rich grounds. You'll start noticing the organic waste stream everywhere and wondering why more people aren't capturing this valuable resource. The environmental impact of your composting efforts extends far beyond your own garden. Every pound of organic matter you divert from the landfill prevents methane emissions, one of the most potent greenhouse gases. You're reducing the need for synthetic fertilizers, which require enormous amounts of energy to produce and can cause water pollution when overused. Your compost builds soil carbon, actually sequestering atmospheric carbon dioxide in a stable form that benefits plant growth. As you become more experienced with composting, you'll develop intuition about the process. You'll know by smell when your pile needs more brown material. You'll recognize the sound of a well-balanced pile when you turn it. The way properly composted material sounds different from fresh organic matter. You'll develop preferences for certain types of materials and techniques that work best in your climate and situation. Many composters find that their hobby expands over time. You might start with a simple bin system and eventually graduate to multiple piles, worm composting, or even bokashi fermentation. Some people become so passionate about composting that they help organize community composting programs or teach workshops for neighbors. The principles you learn from composting often translate into other areas of sustainable living. Your composting journey also connects you to seasonal rhythms in a way that modern life often obscures. Fall becomes a time of gathering leaves and preparing for winter's slower decomposition. Spring brings the excitement of turning over piles and discovering the winter's work. Summer means frequent harvests of grass clippings and garden trimmings. Winter offers time to plan improvements and prepare materials for the coming year. The finished compost you harvest represents more than just plant food. It's a symbol of patience, of working with natural processes rather than against them, of taking responsibility for your own waste stream. It's proof that you can create something valuable from something that others might consider garbage. Every shovelful of rich, dark compost tells a story of transformation, of death becoming life, of waste becoming wealth. So as you spread that first batch of homemade compost around your plants, take a moment to appreciate what you've accomplished. You've learned to work with billions of microorganisms, to balance carbon and nitrogen, to manage moisture and oxygen. You've created habitat for countless beneficial creatures, from bacteria to earthworms to beneficial insects. You've reduced your environmental footprint while improving your soil's health and productivity. The cycle is complete, but it's also just beginning. The plants you feed with this compost will grow and eventually die, their leaves and stems returning to your compost pile to begin the process anew. You've become part of an endless cycle of growth and renewal, a participant in the fundamental processes that sustain life on Earth. And that perhaps more than any gardening benefit is the true gift of composting. As you continue your composting journey, remember that each handful of finished compost represents a small victory in the ongoing conversation between human activity and natural processes. The dark, crumbly soil amendment you've created is more than just a garden input. It's a testament to your commitment to working with nature rather than against it. This transformation from kitchen scraps and yard waste to nutrient-rich humus demonstrates one of the most fundamental principles of sustainable living. Nothing truly goes to waste when we understand how to work within natural cycles. The beauty of composting lies not just in its end product, but in the mindful practice it cultivates. Every time you sort your organic waste, you're making a conscious decision to participate in the circular economy that has sustained life on Earth for billions of years. You're choosing to see potential where others see waste, to invest time in a process that yields benefits far beyond the immediate, and to take responsibility for the full life cycle of the materials that pass through your household. As seasons change and your composting system matures, you'll develop an intuitive understanding of the delicate balance required to maintain healthy decomposition. The daily ritual of adding materials, monitoring moisture, and occasionally turning your pile becomes a form of meditation, connecting you to the rhythms of decay and renewal that govern all living systems. This connection often extends beyond the compost bin, influencing how you view consumption, waste, and your role in the broader ecosystem. Your composting success will inevitably inspire others in your community. Neighbors will notice the reduced volume of waste you send to the curb, friends will admire the vigor of your garden plants, and family members will begin to understand the value of organic matter that they previously took for granted. This ripple effect is one of composting's most powerful benefits. It transforms not just organic waste, but perspectives and behaviors throughout your social network. The economic advantages of composting become increasingly apparent as your system matures. The money saved on commercial fertilizers and soil amendments adds up significantly over time, while the reduced volume of household waste can lead to lower garbage collection fees in many communities. More importantly, the improved soil structure and fertility resulting from regular compost application reduces the need for water, pesticides, and other costly inputs, creating a more economically sustainable approach to gardening and landscaping. Environmental scientists increasingly recognize composting as a crucial strategy for addressing climate change. When organic waste decomposes in landfills without adequate oxygen, it produces methane, a greenhouse gas approximately 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. By diverting organic materials to composting systems where they decompose aerobically, you're directly reducing methane emissions while creating a product that sequesters carbon in soil. This dual benefit makes composting one of the most accessible and impactful actions individuals can take to mitigate their environmental footprint. The soil biology you nurture through composting extends far beyond the visible earthworms and decomposing materials. Each gram of finished compost contains billions of beneficial microorganisms that form complex relationships with plant roots, helping them access nutrients, resist diseases, and tolerate environmental stresses. These microscopic partnerships, known as the soil food web, represent one of nature's most sophisticated and efficient systems for supporting plant life. By maintaining healthy compost, you're cultivating biodiversity at the most fundamental level. Advanced composters often experiment with specialized techniques that can enhance their results. Vermicomposting, which uses specific species of worms to accelerate decomposition, produces castings with exceptionally high nutrient content and beneficial microbial activity. Bokashi composting, a fermentation-based method developed in Japan, allows composters to process meat, dairy, and other materials typically excluded from traditional systems. These techniques demonstrate the flexibility and adaptability of composting principles, encouraging experimentation and continuous learning. The timing of compost application can significantly influence its effectiveness in garden settings. Spring applications provide nutrients for the growing season ahead, while fall applications allow materials to integrate with soil over winter, improving structure and biological activity before planting begins. Many experienced gardeners develop seasonal rhythms around their composting activities, harvesting finished compost in coordination with their planting schedules and adjusting their input materials based on seasonal availability. Urban composting presents unique challenges and opportunities that reflect the growing movement towards sustainable city living. Apartment dwellers can successfully compost using small-scale systems like worm bins or bokashi buckets, while community gardens and shared composting facilities provide collaborative solutions for processing larger volumes of organic waste. These urban innovations demonstrate that composting principles can be adapted to virtually any living situation, making this sustainable practice accessible regardless of space constraints. The quality of your finished compost depends largely on the diversity of materials you've incorporated throughout the decomposition process. Compost made from a wide variety of organic materials will contain a broader spectrum of nutrients and beneficial microorganisms than compost made from limited inputs. This principle encourages composters to seek out diverse materials from fallen leaves and grass clippings to coffee grounds and vegetable scraps, creating a more complete and nutritionally balanced final product. Troubleshooting. Composting problems becomes easier with experience, but certain principles remain constant. Persistent odors almost always indicate anaerobic conditions caused by excess moisture or insufficient aeration. Slow decomposition typically results from improper carbon to nitrogen ratios, inadequate moisture, or lack of microbial activity. Pest problems often stem from improper material selection or inadequate covering of fresh additions. Understanding these cause and effect relationships empowers composters to make informed adjustments rather than abandoning their systems when problems arise. The therapeutic benefits of composting extend beyond the satisfaction of creating useful products from waste materials. The physical activity involved in maintaining compost systems provides gentle exercise and time outdoors, while the cyclical nature of the process offers a sense of continuity and purpose. Many composters report that tending their systems provides a welcome break from digital devices and indoor environments, creating space for reflection and connection with natural processes. Educational opportunities abound for composters who want to deepen their understanding of soil science, ecology, and sustainable agriculture. Local extension offices often offer workshops on composting techniques, while online resources provide access to research on soil biology and organic matter management. This learning process transforms composting from a simple waste management strategy into a gateway for understanding complex ecological relationships and agricultural practices. The integration of composting into broader sustainability practices creates synergies that amplify environmental benefits. Composters often become more conscious of their food purchasing decisions, choosing items with less packaging and prioritizing locally grown produce. They may develop interests in gardening, permaculture, or other practices that complement their composting activities. This holistic approach to sustainable living demonstrates how individual actions can catalyze broader lifestyle changes. As you continue developing your composting skills, remember that perfection is not the goal. Nature's systems are inherently resilient and adaptable, and your composting efforts will succeed even if they don't match textbook descriptions of ideal conditions. The most important step is beginning the process and maintaining consistency in your efforts. Each batch of compost you create contributes to soil health, reduces waste, and strengthens your connection to the natural world. Your composting journey represents participation in one of humanity's oldest and most essential practices. Archaeological evidence shows that humans have been composting organic materials for thousands of years, recognizing the value of returning nutrients to soil long before modern science explained the mechanisms involved. By composting, you're connecting with this ancient wisdom while addressing contemporary environmental challenges, bridging traditional knowledge with modern sustainability imperatives. The legacy of your composting efforts extends far beyond the immediate benefits to your garden or household waste stream. The soil organic matter you create will continue supporting plant growth and soil biology for years after application, while the reduced waste sent to landfills contributes to long-term environmental health. The knowledge and enthusiasm you develop through composting may inspire others to adopt similar practices, multiplying the positive impact of your individual efforts. Now that you've mastered the fundamentals and learned how to troubleshoot common challenges, you're ready to harvest your first batch of finished compost. This moment is truly rewarding as you witness the complete transformation of kitchen scraps and yard waste into rich, dark, crumbly soil amendment that looks and smells like the forest floor. Your finished compost should have a pleasant, earthy aroma and a uniform texture where individual materials are no longer recognizable. The color will be deep brown to black, and it should feel slightly moist but not soggy. When you squeeze a handful, it should hold together briefly before crumbling apart. This is your signal that the decomposition process is complete and your compost is ready to nourish your plants. Using your compost effectively maximizes all the effort you've invested. Mix it into garden beds as a soil amendment, use it as a top dressing around existing plants, or blend it with potting soil for container gardens. A general rule is to use about 20 to 30% compost in your soil mix. Your plants will respond with improved growth, better disease resistance, and enhanced nutrient uptake. The beauty of composting extends far beyond the practical benefits. Each time you add scraps to your bin instead of throwing them in the trash, you're participating in a circular economy that mimics nature's own systems. You're reducing methane emissions from landfills, decreasing your household waste, and creating a valuable resource right in your backyard. This simple practice connects you to the fundamental cycles that sustain all life on Earth. As you continue your composting journey, remember that every expert was once a beginner. Your first batch might not be perfect, and that's completely normal. Each pile teaches you something new about the process, your local climate, and the specific materials you're working with. Keep notes about what works well and what challenges you encounter. This knowledge will make each subsequent batch better than the last. Consider expanding your composting knowledge by exploring different methods, experimenting with various materials, and connecting with local gardening communities. Many experienced composters are eager to share their insights and may even provide you with materials or advice. Some communities have composting groups where members share resources and knowledge. Your composting practice also serves as an excellent teaching opportunity for family members, friends, and neighbors. Children especially benefit from seeing this natural process firsthand, learning about decomposition, soil health, and environmental stewardship. By sharing your knowledge, you're helping to create a more sustainable community. Remember that composting is ultimately about working with natural processes rather than against them. Trust in the remarkable ability of microorganisms to transform organic waste into garden gold. Be patient with the process, stay consistent with your maintenance routine, and enjoy the satisfaction of creating something valuable from materials that would otherwise be wasted. Congratulations on taking this important step towards sustainable living. Your compost bin represents more than just a waste reduction strategy. It's a symbol of your commitment to environmental responsibility and your willingness to participate actively in the cycles that sustain our planet. Happy composting, and may your garden flourish with the rich, life-giving soil you've created.